The words I would describe Central Avenue is adventurous, amazing, and delicious. You will find new people, new smiles, new product, new services, and you will definitely enjoy their heart, how loving they are, and how giving themselves into it these people are.
We opened about 3 years ago. My parents have always wanted to have like a store or something of their own. So I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's actually open a physical store. This is them living their dream through me.
Marques Boots comenzamos en octubre del 2006. Ya este año cumplimos 13 años. Un día que vine aquí a comer a las gorditas, vi este local y nos gustó. Y ya desde entonces ya tenemos casi 4 años aquí.
We opened it on Central because we wanted to be part of the community, a Hispanic community, Hispanic owned. If you go down Central, every business is majorly owned by Hispanics. Driving down Central is seeing people's dreams come true. If you ever drive down there like at night and then you just hear all this like banda music coming out of random people's car, people coming out of Torito because they're getting their groceries for dinner. And it's just colorful. Central is so diverse.
No batallé mucho para que nos volviera a encontrar. A pesar de que hemos cambiado muchas veces de locación, la gente, gracias a Dios, nos ha seguido a donde quiera que nos vamos y la gente nos ha apoyado muchísimo en esta área, en la comunidad.
I like to actually drive down Central and I'm like, wow, this is my Hispanic community. My people are getting up there, they're grinding, they're pushing. That's what Central Avenue to me is. All the Hispanics are there to show people that they can also do it.
In many ways, the lack of understanding of the system, but the will of success has pushed the community to thrive on its own grounds.
So Central's growing. We moved to our new location because our old location, our rent was going up and we were told because of the market. They were like, oh, it's because this area is becoming more popular. Central is getting new businesses, not only owned by Hispanic, but owned by other people, and I love it. Cool, let's make this whole community grow. I'm all for it. But when you come in and you try to push Hispanics to one side of Central, that I don't like. That I will stand up for.
When it comes down to new people coming in and buying and building and changing, that has to come, but that has to come with education and help to strengthen the financials of our own people so they don't get displaced. The avenue should thrive just like the community. The community should thrive just like its people. And I believe there are ways to get that done without sacrificing the people that have been involved in the growth and development of our area and have built their own future here.
I'm an Hispanic woman. The odds are against me. I shouldn't be doing this. We're not stopping anytime soon. And I hope the store grows and I hope we're able to serve our community.
Y al ver que lo que hemos evolucionado, realmente sí me llena mucho de orgullo.
We have a good future. We just have to know how to make it ours. Living in Wyandotte County, living in the central area, is not about survival. It's about growth, and we are growing.
Welcome back to the 2020 ESHIP Summit. We're welcoming folks from all 50 states, 20 countries, DC, Puerto Rico, and lots of places in between. For those of you who joined us this morning, you already know we're in an interactive platform, conference platform, lots of opportunities to use the chat function, the poll function, as well as see who else is here with you. For those of us joining on the YouTube stream, you can also participate in the interactive opportunities. If you've got Twitter, the hashtag is ESHIPSummit, and you certainly can reply to some of the interactive prompts that I'm sharing here this afternoon if you want to connect with others who are there on the live stream, the YouTube stream. So welcome back for those of you who joined us this morning, and if you're new, welcome. thanks for joining us. We appreciate the opportunity and the time you're spending with us as we talk and explore how to build more inclusive, entrepreneurial-focused communities, and how we ensure that the prosperity of our economy in the future is sustainable and inclusive. First thing I want to do for those of you who have come back, I want you to make sure that you think about your experience from our last campfire and what are some of those lessons that you've taken away. So take a couple seconds, think about that. You've had the chance to get together in small groups, which we do during our campfires, to create smaller opportunities to connect with people across the country and around the globe. So first, we're going to do this in two parts. For those of you who are new, you've just joined in, this is your first visit. Well, first of all, I'm Andy Stoll. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Kauffman Foundation. I'm your MC and host today. If you could use the chat function there on the screen and share with us what community you're coming from or representing today, that would be really fantastic. You can share your organization as well. If you've done that before, you know, it sounds like our chat is sort of blowing up or like pushing the limits of what chat, but feel free to share that so you can connect with people that are maybe nearby or in places that you have connections with. For those of you who are in our campfires then, we're going to blow the chat up. We're going to literally break the internet. We'd love to have you share in that campfire, what's the one thing that you took away from that conversation that you think would be helpful for other folks to think about? Go ahead and share that in the chat as well. And if you're extra ambitious and you really want to please Todd and the team at the Value Web, if you go back to the agenda entry for the Campfire One, they built a conversation place where you can actually share your high-level learnings back with Todd and his team, and they'll gather that and incorporate that into some of the graphic illustrations that we're creating throughout the event. All right. Well, that's some of the housekeeping notes, but I want to get on to the program. So as happened in our first plenary, I am honored and excited to bring on a co-host for this session. I want to bring and welcome into our conversation one of my heroes, Faye Horwit, who is the president of Forward Cities. Faye is zooming in, I think, from North Carolina, but I guess I don't even know where I'm zooming in today. Faye, thank you so much for joining us, and you're going to co-host and help us guide some of these conversations this afternoon. Faye, here's where I want to start. So you and I actually didn't know each other when the ESHIP Summit got started, and you have become one of my best friends in the world of entrepreneurial ecosystem. We've collaborated together. We've done all sorts of interesting things together. But 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, you didn't identify as an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder. You thought of yourself, I don't know, in a certain way, but you wouldn't have come to a conference on entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And my sense is for you, for some of you, that's the same situation. How did I get here? Am I really an ecosystem builder? Is ecosystem building just a new fandangled word for entrepreneurial support? And some people don't identify with that term. My goal is by the end of this summit that you raise your hand when the question is asked, are you an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder? But Faye, I want to start with you. Tell us your story of how you became or realized or came to see that you were, in fact, an entrepreneurial ecosystem builder. I just want to point out that Faye works as the president of Forward Cities, which is one of the nation's, I think, thought leaders in how to build more inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. Faye, tell us your story and how you got here.
Yeah, definitely. Great to be with you, Andy. I'm loving this day so far. I will say, just like there's an accidental tourist, I am the accidental ecosystem builder. Real truth, I did not even know what the word meant, the term meant like 4 years ago. I started off in North Carolina with a very different dream of my own. I wanted to start a marketing business for women founders. But I quickly realized that while there was a significant support network and funding for tech startups, those things were pretty much non-existent for someone like me, a Black single mom. So rather than just accepting that, I made the decision to do something about it. And I put my original business idea on hold and started helping women and people of color to get to those same resources that I couldn't get to. And I will tell you, it was not easy because it became really clear to me that the system was not built to do what I wanted it to do, nor for the businesses that needed it most. And worse, I really felt like that I was the only one that was being honest about the challenges and willing to have the hard conversations. Now, mind you, this was back before it was fashionable to support Black businesses. A lot has changed in the last couple of years. So where do you go when you want to find answers? Google. I searched to find others that were thinking on the systems level, and I found the Kauffman Foundation, and I found Forward Cities, and our CEO, Christopher Gergen. And this organization that is really intentionally focused on helping communities and regions around the country to grow more equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. So 2 years later, here I am, I'm the president, and I get to do this amazing work to very intentionally equip communities with what we call at Forward Cities Abide: access, belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity. And I also get to partner with folks like you, Andy, and the amazing growing community of ecosystem builders around the country.
Well, that's fantastic, Faye. I think part of your story is really interesting is you reached out to Christopher and the team at Forward Cities to ask if they could come help you in the work that you were doing in Winston-Salem, and instead they offered you a job, and now you help communities all over the country, and then you wanted to reach out to the Kauffman Foundation, and look, here we are collaborating, and you've joined us on stage. And that was just about 3 or 4 years ago, so the journey's fast. Learning about ecosystem building is really difficult because there isn't a playbook or a textbook or one website that you can go and learn about it, because it's really an emerging practice. So peer-to-peer learning is the fastest way to learn. The good news is that we have here a short, hopefully brisk conversation with some of our peers who are really the pioneers and the thought leaders that have helped develop this practice of entrepreneurial ecosystem building. So I want to bring into our conversation Maria. She's the founder of US SourceLink and has done a lot of the foundational ecosystem building work in her team in Kansas City for the last almost 20 years. Lily, who's the Chief Technology Officer, Chief Technology Community Officer at the Kapoor Center, is doing a ton of amazing, inspiring work in Oakland to make sure the tech ecosystem there is vibrant, connected, inclusive, and equitable. And then we have Charles Ross, who is joining us, I believe, from Atlanta. He's the CEO of NBIA, or the International Business Innovation Association. What's fantastic about Charles' story, before he got into that position as CEO, he was working building the ecosystem in Atlanta and across the Southeast. So all these folks, active ecosystem builders out there doing it now in their roles, they actually help a lot of other ecosystem builders. So I'd like to welcome everybody to joining us at the ESHIP Summit. It's so fantastic to see you.
Welcome.
Faye, I'm going to let you kick it off with our first question. For those of you who are new, we have these roundtables. They're fast-paced. They're quick. We're not going to get everything in for our participants. It's like CNN. We got to keep it short and pithy. Faye, let's get us started.
Most definitely. So I'm going to jump right in with Maria. SourceLink has supported thousands of entrepreneurs and businesses around the country. Can you give us a quick breakdown of how you think about the different types of entrepreneurs that you serve?
Sure. Every time I say the word entrepreneur, a different bubble, I can see it on the top of somebody's head. And their vision of what an entrepreneur is can be different. So we talk about 4 types. We talk about micro enterprises, Main Street businesses, second stage growth businesses, and innovation led. And we see them as different, just like the owners that run them.
Most definitely. I would say that is the I consider that the Pandora's box question of ecosystem building. What is an entrepreneur? Because you will get 50 different answers.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the places that people often get hung up. I don't know if you all agree with me, but if we're having the conversation, which entrepreneurs are we dealing with? You're actually getting distracted, right? Now, certainly your organization focuses on specific types of entrepreneurs, but in an ecosystem, there's all types of entrepreneurs. And Maria, I think your framework is really good. It comes from your book, Beyond Collisions. Building your entrepreneurial infrastructure. If someone out there in the chat wants to grab a link to that and throw that in the chat, that'd be really helpful. Check out Maria's and Kate's book. But here we got a graphic here, the innovation-led, which are sort of our high-growth companies, tech often, our Main Streeters, our micro businesses, and the second stage, which are the people who are really trying to take an existing company and blow it out to the moon. But in your book, you actually explain, and there's actually a fantastic post on SourceLink, if someone wants to find that for me, the blog that really outlines what these 4 things are. But in our conversation today, we're talking about all of these types of entrepreneurs. We're inclusive of all types of entrepreneurs. I want to go to Lily next. Lily, you're one of, I think, the thought leaders around building inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems, building equitable entrepreneurial ecosystems. But let's go back to the 101 question. If someone said to you, Lily, what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? Like, what do you actually mean? Like, what would be your answer? I mean, you probably get that question a lot.
Sure. The simplest part is everybody has a role to play. Specifically when we think of it as an ecosystem, whether you're in the private sector, public sector, you're a student, you're the person just walking down, window shopping, everybody has a role to play in general. And I think with the entrepreneurial aspect, for me, it's not just about, quote unquote, I have my own company and here's my LLC. It's really thinking about the mindset, which is the continuous learning and experimentation and innovation. And so that's why whenever, as the previous questions of like, how do we come into this, and like, where's the playbook? There is no playbook. It's really about also, looking around the neighborhoods that we're in and what we're supporting, and how each community is unique and important. And I think that that's the part where, and I'm going to push a little bit here on what does it really mean to be an inclusive tech ecosystem in the times that we're in the new world that we're in. I think we need to even reframe and rethink about it, right? Specifically, we are a digital world first now. And so a lot of the work that I was doing in Oakland was to spur more tech startups. But what we realized is there was a lot of different businesses that maybe weren't ready for digital, maybe somewhere COVID, we are digital. And so a lot of work that we've been looking at Oakland specifically is to help identify a lot of brick and mortars, restaurants. Overnight, a lot of them had to digitize their menus. Do they do an app? Do they do a QR code? Do they do the flyers? The reality is that every entrepreneur, and that's where the continuous learning comes in, they all had to be nimble. And unfortunately, we know that there's a gap in the digital skills. There's even a gap in having broadband access and having devices. And so I really want to even go back to the basics of like, how do we create that ecosystem for everyone? Because everybody has a world and we can't just leave people behind. And I think that that's where the inclusive part is explicit. And the other part that I want to make explicit, again, we are in this double, triple pandemic of not just COVID, but also the larger social movement, right? And I think it's a time where we need to have the discussions about racial, gender identity, intersectionality, just be so much more prominent and actually be something that we bring forth as a differentiator. And that's where being able to have these dialogues of, if you're in a community, are the entrepreneurs there at parity of the community that's there? If not, there's work to be done.
Thank you.
And so I think that's the part that I want to make sure folks double down in of what inclusive tech ecosystem really means now. And it's really all of us rethinking our digital strategy.
And I think thanks for highlighting that so early in the conversation, the role of equity and inclusion into this. We're going to talk about that in just a second. I want to go back to the sort of core question. We talked a little bit about what kind of entrepreneurs we're working on. This question, what's an ecosystem? You said that everyone has a role. And you can get into a huge debate here about, well, what are the parts of the ecosystem? And that's also a bit of a distraction to say, well, what are the parts? And let's just make sure we have them. So if you went and looked at all the models of entrepreneurial ecosystems and you made a word cloud, you sort of threw them all together like we're doing at the summit, it would actually look something like a graphic that we put together. And this is not all the parts, but if you get into the discussion around what are the parts and you get stuck there, does our community have each of these? You're missing a big part of this whole equation, because the power of an entrepreneurial ecosystem is not just the parts, but the magic comes from the interactions, the way those parts work together. It's the collaboration and the culture of how all those things work together. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one thing to just think about is ecosystem building isn't just about the blocks, it's about how they all fit together. Faye?
Yes, thanks, Andy. I think that there's when I think about this, I often think of what's the secret sauce, right? You have all these parts, but what is it that makes it come alive? So I'll ask you, Maria, like when you think about what's the role of culture, and what does it mean to create a vibrant ecosystem?
Well, I think one of the things that we talk about is that there are so many different parts to an ecosystem, and you can have connectors, you can have educators, you can have people who are working on the environment to make the environment better. But I think the secret sauce is for all of those to work together. And so collaboration is a big piece of it. And I think in collaborative communities, you see things move a bit faster in building an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I also think the ability for each of us to think beyond our own walls, right? It's not just what I'm doing, but it's what the person next to me is doing and the person across the street is doing. And how do I relate to that? And so having the ability to think beyond my own organization and see how I fit in and move and shift depending on what else is going on around you, as opposed to trying to just build an organization within your own walls.
So Charles, that leads to a really interesting question that I think you can have some insight on. So you're CEO of NBIA, which is a network of innovation-focused incubators, accelerators, innovation spaces. And a lot of folks there have been the pioneers and the drivers of what I would call entrepreneurial support. You also have many ecosystem builders and people working on a systems level, but can you help us understand, I mean, I said it earlier, is ecosystem building just a new fandangled word for an accelerator or running a venture capital firm? Like how, as NBIA, which has been around, I believe, for 20 some years, how do we sort of compare and contrast the traditional incubator accelerator versus this notion of the systems view? Of course, it's a combination of the two. But tell us, Charles, how do you see it?
Sure. So thank you, Andy, for having me. And we're actually NBIA. We're getting ready to we're celebrating our 35th anniversary, so definitely has some history that we can bring to the discussion. And I think that the work of ecosystem building versus the traditional way in which we've supported entrepreneurs, there are a lot of commonalities, but there's some significant differences. The three top for me one is in terms of just the focus of the work itself. So traditionally, entrepreneurial support organizations have worked directly with entrepreneurs versus the ecosystem builders are really working with organizations and institutions and domains. The nature of the work is oftentimes can be very different. When we have traditionally supported entrepreneurs, to be good at that, you really kind of need to know how to guide entrepreneurs through their path and through their journey. And if you're running this through an organization, capacity building, resource development is all key. On the systems level, you're looking at how do these different players and actors that Maria and Lily have talked about, how do they work together? How do they collaborate? How do they exchange resources? And then the last thing I will say is the way in which we celebrate and measure success, I think, is different in these two domains. Clearly, when you're supporting entrepreneurs, it's about what the individual success of those companies and bringing jobs and revenues into communities. And on a systems level, you're looking at other levels of success when you're looking at how interconnected the various players are in your ecosystem.
Fantastic. Faye, you want to shift our conversation maybe a little bit to ecosystem builders? I'll let you have the next question.
Yeah, most definitely. So we're getting to this common understanding of what an ecosystem is, and if that's the case, then what is an ecosystem builder and what do they do? Lily, when you think about an ecosystem builder, let's say I don't know anything about this. How would I know I'm cut out to be an ecosystem builder? What is the role and what skills do I need to have to bring to the table to get into this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually tie it back to my own experience of, we're talking about systems of systems, and there could be so many different configurations of some of the same components. And I think that's what makes a lot of this work really exciting and really adaptable for anyone to join in. But I would say that the key skills for an ecosystem builder is a few things. One, you're the backbone. You want to make sure that you are not somebody who is gathering all the information and keep it for yourself. You want to make sure that you're the person that is creating those bridges, the on-ramps, helping connect the dots. And so you're in the mix of a lot of areas, and folks know that you're kind of like the plug to some degree, if I could say it in the simplest term. But it's also, there's a level of trust that I think it's really important to have, especially now where we aren't able to go and interact and get to know each other in ways that we would, right, in the past. This is where a lot of those ecosystem building relationships are going to come to fruition. And so I would say it's making sure that you're aware of what's happening in your community, your surroundings, having a good sense of what are the organizations that need support, and being a dot connector. And I always think of myself as like a multidisciplined engineer, where you always just got to adapt to the situation. There's a different tool set that you can bring. So like for this conversation, there's certain examples that I would share versus going to an Open Startup Network event where we're working directly on working with founders of color on helping them digitize something, right? And so there is a level sense of you got to just wear different hats. The other part too, a skill that I think is super important, and I said it again, I'm going to keep saying it, continuous learner. Don't get stuck in one role. I think especially now with COVID, you got to rethink everything. This is a time of rebuilding. And I see the silver lining of reimagining all of that. And that requires new skills building. And so as an ecosystem builder, the community is going to look to you to be like, well, what are they doing? How are they adapting? And so we just put those forward.
Fantastic. So my producers are signaling we're almost out of time here. What I would love, well, first of all, let's all have dinner after COVID, and we'll continue this conversation because this is so much fun. And it's actually interesting because none of us, well, we haven't ever had this constellation of conversations, but it's a fantastic group of people. Just to close, I want to ask the question: if you sort of just had one call to action in a sentence that people need, sort of the role of the ecosystem leader that's going to help us get through this COVID moment, like ecosystem builders, just complete the sentence, ecosystem builders or leaders need to do. Maria, just a quick one sentence, what is the sort of role of leaders right now?
So what's happened in COVID, a friend of mine said, is that there's been a giant forest fire and the bottom of the forest has been burnt, but those tall trees have been charred as well. So it's a wonderful time for all of us to come together and think about how our entire system is changing. And as leaders really begin to see where that hurt is and help it grow from all different directions.
Fantastic.
So really reaching out.
Charles, quick, one sentence. What's the role of leaders in this moment?
Yeah, so I would say that it's really the role is for leaders to force help our communities ask the right questions. So I think it's not really about the solution. It's like, what is the question? And I think for many of us, it's like, how do we grow these ecosystems in a way that's sustainable and brings equity to our communities?
Lily, one sentence, what's the role of leaders in this moment?
Empathetic leaders that are creating on-ramps of knowledge while embracing this digital-first reality.
You are an entrepreneurial pitch expert. That was one sentence. Faye, take us out. What advice or what's the role of leaders according to Faye from Faye's vantage point? And we're going to have to wrap this up and keep this rolling along.
Yeah, if you don't know how to support entrepreneurs of color in this time, go find out. Just reach out and do something. Be a human being and go help somebody.
Fantastic, Faye. And tomorrow we're going to have Del Gines join us. We're going to talk about an ecosystem building, sort of 201, a deeper dive in ecosystem. We're going to talk about that conversation specifically. Maria, Charles, Lily, Faye, thank you so much. We're going to have to keep the program rolling. Appreciate you taking the time to be, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, as we explored in our conversation here about ecosystem building, it's really important. It's really about bringing people together and moving our communities from disconnected to connected. It's about building a culture of collaboration across the entire community, a culture that is inclusive and equitable for those who are often left out. If we do that, the sum of all the parts of our community can create something that is greater than the whole. That's a 1 + 1 = 5. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole if we can connect people together. I had the opportunity to sit down with Ed Morrison. He's an expert and a pioneer in what I would call community collaboration. And we wanted to talk about why this type of collaboration is important, how it's different than the way maybe communities operated in the past, and actually why it's so difficult. It sounds easy, hard to do. And most importantly, why we have to lead in different ways as leaders in our communities in the 21st century because of the way global shifts have affected how our communities work. It's a different way that we have to work to build the collaboration muscle in our communities. Ed's book, Strategic Doing, is actually a very helpful guide to understand some of this. Ed is actually having some surgery today, so he wasn't able to join us, but I sat down with Ed. I've got a clip of some of the conversations we had. Let's share the clip with you.
We're here with Ed Morrison from the Agile Strategy Lab. He is an expert in complex collaboration and has spent his career developing a process to help communities collaborate. He's the author or co-author of a book called Strategic Doing, which has been an excellent resource for the work that we've been doing at the Kauffman Foundation. Ed, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
Ed, tell us a little bit about your work, but let's do it in the context of today. So when you pick up the newspaper, we've got wildfires and environmental challenges. We've got sort of social unrest in a number of different fronts in our communities. COVID-19, issues around our economy, our healthcare, our politics. There seems to be more and more of these complex challenges sort of facing society today. Can you help me understand this term, complex problems? What is a complex problem?
Well, it's a problem that doesn't have a clear definition. The term that academics have used in the past is wicked problems. These are wicked problems because they don't have any single solution to them. They're not yes/no type problems. They're not technical problems. They don't have really clear boundaries as to what's included, what's not included. And of course, you've got a lot of different people looking at the problem, so they're seeing different perspectives of it. So this makes it all complex in terms of trying to develop solutions.
Yeah, and I think COVID-19 has really demonstrated the notion of the complex problems, because when you try to solve for one part of it, it sort of sets off another challenge on the other side of that maybe we didn't see coming. Is that a characteristic of a complex challenge or a wicked problem?
Yeah, every intervention changes the system, so you can have some unintended consequences. And what we've learned is that you have to be able to understand what those unintended consequences are and then try to plan for them or adjust to them. That's what we talk about in terms of agility or resilience.
What is the role of a leader in this moment as we're dealing with these challenges and these opportunities in this moment?
Well, let's step back and understand that what we're trying to do is build new knowledge networks, right? We've got knowledge and we're trying to apply this knowledge in new and different ways that create more value for our communities and values for our networks and in our neighborhoods and the like. So the whole issue is how do we transmit knowledge? How do we build knowledge within a group? And the answer is a conversation. It seems very paradoxical that as we move toward a more advanced age, we actually have to go back to a fundamental technology, if you will, and that is how do we have conversations? And what we've learned is that strategic conversations actually have a structure to them. These are complex collaborations emerge out of these conversations. They have a structure to them. And so the job of leadership now is to create the space in which those deeper conversations can happen. This is where Amy Edmondson's work around psychological safety is so critical. We have to create these safe spaces. We have to frame conversations around potential opportunities. We have to look for potential opportunities. We have to sense these opportunities, and we have to share that. And then we have to run some experiments. We have to figure out what is it that we could do together. How could we do this? And so it's a continuous experimental learning by doing. So it's actually a rigorous process, but it's all driven by conversation. And what we've learned is that these conversations can be guided, and they're most often guided by teams because they are complex. They require different sets of skills at different stages of the conversation, and nobody's good at all these skills. Nobody's good at, so no one person is going to lead us out of this. It's going to be a set of people who are committed to each other, who are committed to guiding conversations, who are committed to having that core team, and then building networks with porous boundaries so more and more people, more and more resources can flow in.
Tell us a little bit more why these cross-community collaborations are so difficult. I mean, you've helped a lot of communities do that, but what's getting in the way?
Well, there's a couple of things. In communities that have slowed down, communities are like bicycles. When they slow down, they're harder to balance. So, when you're dealing with communities, well, like Kokomo or Youngstown or some of these rural communities that have been devastated by globalization, you've got a real problem because everything's slowing down. It's like musical chairs. The music's going to stop. There's 7 people in the room, 5 chairs, and everybody knows it. And so they want to dive for the chair. And so part of the challenge is when you're dealing with communities that are on the top of their S curve and it's kind of slowing down, that's a big problem because people just hold on. They get very territorial. Others communities just have not had the experience of collaboration. They don't know how to do it. They just have never done it before. It's not in their genes. They don't have a challenge. And this is really what we were facing in Oklahoma City. How do we build a culture of collaboration? There you have to start small. All of these are based on network thinking. You start small with a core team and you build out from the core team. You build out that way by simply doing the doable, focusing on simple ideas that could be done. We call them big easies, big ideas that are relatively easy to do, that you start on, that you just do. And part of the challenge, of course, is then following through and doing all of that. All of this is no different than stacking bricks. Everybody knows that. There's no secret formula to building a company or building a community. You just, you're persistently stacking bricks. This is the challenge that we have to encourage people to understand, is that we now live in a different world. All of those old structures, these ideas that there's a community foundation that's going to save us. There's a government grant that's going to save us. That's not going to work. And so we have to develop and build new habits. And that's really what we work on, is new habits of conversations that are strategic, that answer two questions. Where are we going? How will we get there?
So Ed, as you look at all of your sort of career and your work, thinking about how communities do these types of collaborations, you look at our present moment, what brings you hope as you look ahead to where our country, where the world's going?
Well, what brings me hope is the fact that we don't have to wait around for anybody. We're really the leaders that we've been waiting for. We don't need, frankly, a lot of leadership coming out of Washington, coming out of the state capitals. We don't really need to wait around for grants to do these things. We can start. We have a lot of assets. Everybody has assets. Here, let me give you a little story. It's when I told the folks in Oklahoma City, there were 6 of us who started, and I said, we're building our strategy not around these 6 people in this room. We're building a strategy around the networks of the 6 people. And every one of you has, let's say, 100 people. So imagine a room 100 times this size, and then tell me we can't do something. So it's when you start to make that shift that you're really building networks. And you're guiding networks, that people start to understand, oh my goodness, we don't have to wait around. We don't have to ask permission. We can start experimentation right now. We can do things. And so the focus on doing the doable is really critical. A second rule of thumb that we use is you want to go fast. We got that. Everybody wants to big change. But in order to go fast, you have to go slowly at first. Be very intentional. Build your trusted relationships. Be careful of your safe civic spaces. Make sure that you've got those in place. Enforce the rules. Make sure that people don't disrupt those spaces. These are all things that are kind of like put the shower curtain on the inside of the bathtub. And, when people start to realize that, they say, okay, well, that makes all sense. Let's go.
I love that, Ed. We're the leaders we've been waiting for, and that there's a lot of power in bringing people together and building relationships and trust, bringing our networks together, working across the community. And if we do that, addressing and overcoming and creating new opportunities during these times of complex challenges is really possible for communities everywhere.
That's absolutely the case. I mean, no matter where I've been, and I've been in very depressed rural communities. I've been in inner city Black neighborhoods. I've been in the Delta of Mississippi and Louisiana. No matter where I've gone, there are cool people doing cool things. And so our challenge is, let's build networks around those folks. Let's create new opportunities.
Thank you, Ed. This has been fantastic. I wish we had more time to talk further, but we know your book, Strategic Doing, as well as your work at the Agile Strategy Lab. There's a lot of resources on your website and available for folks. Appreciate your time with me today, and thank you for your leadership in what has been just a wild, wild year. Thank you very much, Ed.
Thank you.
You are the leaders that you've been waiting for. Fantastic conversation with Ed. That was actually just a clip of it. I'll share the entire interview in our YouTube playlist once the event's over. Ed and I went on for another 10 or 15 minutes, really fantastic. For those of you interested in Strategic Doing, if someone could grab the Strategic Doing website and share it in the chat, that'd be really helpful. There's also information in a couple different places throughout the summit around Strategic Doing. Tomorrow, the folks at the University of North Alabama are actually going to share a story from their work called Shoals Shift, specifically around using Strategic Doing and complex community collaboration to help entrepreneurs in Northern Alabama. So check that out in the community stories for the community stories tomorrow. So now let's shift our focus to our final roundtable of this thing, and we're going to turn conversations into actions. Conversations are the building blocks of how we work together collaboratively. Ed mentioned that. They are the way we connect and then we do stuff. So what we want to do is take this out of the realm of theory around what these ecosystems are and what ecosystem builders do. And we want to travel over to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we're going to chat with 5 community leaders, ecosystem builders, about how they've worked together to create a community that's even more supportive for entrepreneurs of all types. I think it's one of the most impressive efforts that I have seen both in the US and across the country. So I want to invite a very large group of people to join us, but they were also important. We wanted to include them. There's another 14 dozen people that we want to have, but at some point Zoom tells you have to get the advanced subscription and pay for that, and I don't know I don't know if we wanted to do that. Just kidding. I want to welcome former Mayor Richard Berry, the former mayor of Albuquerque, to our conversation. Kelly, who's joining us from the Albuquerque Community Foundation. Cynthia, who heads the city's, she's the city's director of economic development. Vanessa, she is a local entrepreneur, a local leader and ecosystem builder, and has her work in all sorts of different areas. And then Eric, who's the former head of the Tech Council. He's the co-founder of 1 Million Cups and like 1,000 other things. And between Vanessa and Eric, I think they've started half the things, or at least have been involved in collaborating to create about half of some of the most exciting, unique things I've ever seen on sort of the community building level. So thank you all for joining us today. Eric, you're the one I reached out to and I said, I want to tell the Albuquerque story. And we want to do this in a way that's representative of all the people, but we need about 5 folks because we only have a very short amount of time. And we are about to try something absolutely wild. And I just want to set that up for the audience so they understand the risk here. The risk is we're going to try to tell a story of a decade of work that involved hundreds of people and thousands of entrepreneurs, and we're going to try to do it in 20 minutes. I'll be honest with you, it might not work. So this is how we're going to set it up. This group has got together a couple times. They've been collaborators in many different ways over the years. And they've come up with a list of sort of 10 key moments in the history of the Albuquerque entrepreneurial ecosystem since 2010. Certainly many things happened before 2010, and certainly many things are going to have to happen after or going to happen. We just want to talk about a decade of work by lots of leaders in the community. So a nice way is you're thinking about entrepreneurial ecosystem building, or one analogy I really like is to think about building an ecosystem in the same way you think about acupuncture or maybe like massage. So if you want to change the system, if you want to release some energy, you sort of have to poke or stick a pin in the right place into the system. And sometimes when you poke, absolutely nothing happens. And then at other times when you poke, a bunch of energy is released, right? Like something happens and it changes the health and the well-being of that system. So in the same way, when you think about building entrepreneurial ecosystems, it's kind of the same thing. You need to poke. You need to hit an acupuncture point. And the first time you maybe don't get it right, and you poke some things, and something happens, and you learn from it, so you poke again. And then over time as a team, you really, as a group, you figure out, well, what is the way that we shift and make our system more connected, more inclusive, and more equitable? So we're going to talk through these 10 sort of moments that Albuquerque sort of poked the box. They poked the system, and the results were really fantastic. So Eric, first off, welcome. Help us set the stage briefly, and just tell us high level, where was Albuquerque's entrepreneurial ecosystem a decade ago in 2010, and where is it today?
Yeah, sure thing. Great to be here. Let's see. So the quick version of Albuquerque at that point is Albuquerque in New Mexico is not a place of great wealth, great financial wealth. We don't have a ton of corporate headquarters like some cities that we sometimes are jealous of. We do have federal labs. We have a great local research university and a great forward-thinking community college. In addition to that, it's a very creative place between tech and all of the arts and a very rich cultural history. But we didn't really have a focus to or from my perspective, we didn't really have a focus to our entrepreneurial activity until basically the Berry administration in about 2012. And that's the thing that to me put us on a different path. You know, we're still figuring out where that's going, but I wanted to ask Mayor Berry, what was it that a lot of cities, they want to be business friendly. Business friendly is the term that I remember from way back then. What was it that caused you to take a path that was really focused on the entrepreneur?
And actually, Mayor Berry, thanks for joining us. I'm going to actually interject because I want to help the audience follow along.
Oh, sure.
Who's listening. I want to help you understand the context. So we've prepared a timeline that I'd like to bring up. This group has identified 10 moments, key moments in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. We will share this out, or if someone wants to screenshot it and keep it in front of you. These are all of the interventions, the moments, the acupuncture points that happened. We're going to start at the top. We're not going to be able to cover them all. There's clearly a lot. But you know what? There's a story behind each of these. And if you want to learn more, there's lots of opportunities to talk with these folks and lots of other folks that are here from Albuquerque to dig into them. I also want to make sure, Faye, you keep me honest. We got to keep this sucker moving. So Faye, if you want to hop in or you need to redirect us, this might not work, but think of it as a lightning pitch competition. So Eric, you got to set up The first thing on our list is in 2012 in November, the Berry administration really shifted in his second term to a focus on entrepreneurship. And here he is live with us, the former mayor, Mayor Berry. Do you want to just tell us, take a shot at sort of what Eric asked?
Sure, Andy, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me be on with these real rock stars on this panel from Albuquerque. So there's a place for an elected official in all of this. I came out of the business world. I spent most of my career working with and for minority-owned businesses, and in startups particularly, and in a minority majority city and state. That's actually very cool and normal for Albuquerque. But we have centuries of entrepreneurial spirit here. So we just decided, why don't we just hit the like button and give agency to people in our community, some who have been doing great work for decades, like West, the Hispano Chamber, the Albuquerque Community Foundation, and others, and just give everybody an opportunity to come to the table, put the bully pulpit of the mayor's office behind it, put resources behind these initiatives that we thought were going to be meaningful, start accelerators that we didn't have, support the ones that were already there. I know we're in a hurry today, so I'm going to keep it short. I'm just going to tee it up by saying it was going on before we got here. It was going on when I was a mayor, and it was a fantastic opportunity. I think the leaders in Albuquerque took us to the forefront of entrepreneurial ecosystems in the country. The continued work goes on and on each day. But it just started with a mindset coming in of believing in the city, and that they had that spirit already, and what could we do to bolster that?
So my question then is, for the rest of you who have joined us, and we're going to popcorn around and try to make this quick. We'll see. I said this might not work. Mayor Berry's administration sort of declared entrepreneurship as a focus of their work. Kelly, how did that affect what you were doing at the Community Foundation? Like, did you know all about entrepreneurs, or what happened when that became a priority of the city's administration?
Well, we jumped in and were involved when Living Cities selected Albuquerque through the mayor's office to be one of the cities in the Living Cities Integration Initiative. And from day one, our focus was job growth and increased wages for entrepreneurs of color. So from that point on, we all knew that's what we were going to dig into. That was our common goal. So the Community Foundation joined that Living Cities table. And as we started to see about those opportunities and think about what our foundation could do, we decided to shift all of our grant making and add the criteria of access to economic opportunities. That would be through all of our grants, arts, education, health, human services, and then specifically we would dig into economic development.
That's great. We're skipping ahead 2 levels on our timeline. I want to roll back just to the beginning, 2012. Berry administration sort of shifts this focus to entrepreneurship. Any of you have a reflection on sort of remembering that moment? I mean, were you all good friends with Mayor Berry at the time? And Vanessa, you may not have even been in the community at that time. I'm trying to remember. Anyone else want to jump in? Eric, do you remember that moment?
I certainly do. The one that's next on our timeline is it's the University of New Mexico and Central New Mexico C&M Community College. They really got on board in a big way, bigger than I think we'd ever expected before. So seeing major institutions, Nusenda as well, major institutions step up and saying, we're shoulder to shoulder in this effort. I think the Berry administration was the catalyst, but having these organizations really work together in making this happen was tremendous.
Yeah. It's tremendous. And so you were at the Tech Council too at the time, and so your work at the Tech Council sort of connects with the universities. Both the University of New Mexico, but also the local community college launched entrepreneur-related initiatives, potentially spurred by the mayor's office saying, hey, this is important, because that was the year following. Kelly, you mentioned the Living Cities engagement, which Living Cities is a national organization that helps build more equitable and inclusive communities. Shout out to everybody in the Living Cities team who's with us. Learn more about them in the Resource Expo. But that Living Cities engagement was where the Community Foundation got involved. And you had told me previously, Kelly, that you all hadn't thought about entrepreneurship much, and that sort of shifted you to recognize that entrepreneurship had a role in creating economic independence for citizens of the community. And you could leverage donations and charitable dollars to be able to sort of address that. Let's keep rolling on. Let's bring our timeline back again. We're through 3 of the 4. Eric, tell us a little bit about number 4 on our list, Native Entrepreneurs in Residence Program. Just give us a brief overview.
So the Native Entrepreneur in Residence Program at New Mexico Community Capital, I believe we're hearing from them as part of one of the breakouts tomorrow.
That's right.
But that was just real, and I don't have the full background on that. Vanessa, do you recall the basics of that by any chance?
Yeah, basically they started, I think, in early 2012, really as an opportunity to create a fund, which they created for Indigenous entrepreneurs, as well as providing culturally relevant technical assistance programming, where they were offering the friends and family round, really for Native entrepreneurs, which doesn't exist for the community. And that, I would say, was a cornerstone, really, to get something going, and also to start talking about entrepreneurship for Native people in a very different way than had happened in the past. So I would say that was kind of coming alongside a lot of these other activities and was lifted and spurred by so many of these other groups.
Can you give us the 30-second pitch on what a little bit more on that, like the New Mexico Community Capital Organization?
Yeah, New Mexico Community Capital is an Indigenous-led organization focused on providing high-touch, quality coaching and mentoring support for Native American entrepreneurs nationally. They do that through culturally relevant programming, as well as connecting and leading activities virtually and non-virtually to help people find access to capital.
Great, and they're going to be hosting a session tomorrow during the community storytelling at their Indigi Exchange marketplace that they built in COVID-19 response. So fantastic! I got to keep us rolling along to keep the momentum growing. Following back to our timeline, if we can bring that one back up again, the Native Entrepreneurs in Residence program, which happened in 2014, led a little bit later to just a whole slew of new incubators, accelerators. One, creative startups focused on creative, high-growth startups, which that's a whole another group you need to, if someone could put the link for creative startups inside of the chat, that would be helpful. 1 Million Cups, which is a program of the Kauffman Foundation. Eric and your team brought that. Eric, tell us a little bit more what happened Global Entrepreneurship Week in November of 2014, and then I think I want to actually hear more from Cynthia, but set this up for us, Eric.
Sure thing. So what we saw in 2014 was really the culmination of a lot of the groundwork that had already happened. So the great thing about Global Entrepreneurship Week is everybody was participating. So we had a Mayor's Prize event from the Albuquerque Community Foundation and I think City Alive. We had sessions from ABQID, Venture-Backed Accelerator and Creative Startups. But we had a lot of other organizations that were sometimes more grassroots in the arts, et cetera. It was also the launch of 1 Million Cups. We're the 50th city to do that. And also alongside that, some folks were inspired by what we were doing with that and launched a bilingual version, a Spanish version of 1 Million Cups.
It was the first in the nation too, is my understanding, right? With it, Cynthia, you were involved in the early days of Global Entrepreneurship Week and bringing that to Albuquerque. Tell us about that, and tell us, but more so, what's the effect of it? When you did it, what happened? What was the impact? You pushed that little acupuncture point and something happened. What happened? Tell us about that.
Certainly, thank you. So what spurred from Global Entrepreneurship Week, so in 2016, before taking the helm of economic development for the city of Albuquerque, I spent nearly 2 decades at the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. At that time, having conversations, a part of Living Cities, those initiatives, City Alive. So at that time, we saw a gap and we introduced the country's first bilingual entrepreneurship accelerator. This accelerator focused on helping immigrant entrepreneurs that were operating in the shadows. We supported them in starting companies and gain just those very basic business skills that are necessary to be successful.
And then next up, Vanessa, I'm going to turn it to you because I know this was one of your creations and you worked in collaboration with the city and many entrepreneur support organizations. But tell us a little bit about the City Navigator program and what that actually is. Let's try to keep it swift because I know we could talk a whole session on it because it's one of my favorite programs I've ever seen in the country. Vanessa, tell us about it.
Sure. We started the City Navigators, which was actually the Small Business Resource Collaborative, originally as a result of a major infrastructure project that came through Albuquerque. What we learned was that small businesses, mom and pop shops, businesses that relied on walk-in traffic really weren't engaging and activating a lot of the entrepreneur support organizations at the level they should. We also found that communities of color, particularly entrepreneurs of color, particularly weren't engaging in it. So through that, we created City Navigators, which became a multi-stakeholder partnership across the city with about 7 partners, all from different parts, serving different parts of community, who created a rational ecosystem in terms of having folks on the ground. If anyone's familiar with Promotora, we had a train the trainer, which is we would identify leaders from that place who spoke that language, was from that community, became our navigators. And what they did was they connected small businesses to all of the ecosystem support systems to help them grow and thrive.
Give us one sentence on Native Women Lead. I know, again, an entire session, Vanessa, and that will be for our next summit. But give us one sentence on what Native Women Lead is.
Just want to shout out, it started really because of how Faye felt why she started her work. It's co-founded by 8 Native American women who saw there was not any services or support systems for us as Indigenous women entrepreneurs. We are an organization now nationally, slowly growing globally to basically invest and support Indigenous women into positions of CEO and leadership. And we do that through technical assistance and access to capital.
Fantastic. Wow, we're almost all through, and we're not even getting to the part where I really want to get into, which is how great you're all friends. So when this started, all of you were best friends. You had meetings every week, and you had a strategic plan that you wrote in 2010. Is that how it worked, Mayor Berry?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, we did a gap analysis, and we tried to figure out who's doing great work, and there was lots of that going on. And we decided to ask people to pivot if there were things that we needed to do in our community. We asked them to think about doing things differently. Build this mindset of risk taking, start thinking a little bit differently, lift up the entrepreneurs in our community. It's already a big tent in Albuquerque. It's already a very inclusive place. So we wanted to make sure everybody felt welcome. We wanted to bolster our relationship with the university, and we built an innovation district because of that partnership with the university. These third-party outside folks like the Kaufman Foundation, Living City, Steve Case came to town. He was on earlier this morning. Everybody just jumped in. But what really catalyzed this were people that are on the screen with us today, and people like them in our community who said, amen to this idea that we're going to lift this up. And even though we've been doing it, we're really celebrate it. And it took off farther and faster than I would have even hoped for as a mayor. So, kudos to these people and the rest of our community.
So Eric, actually this brings us to today. I know that was a whirlwind thing. I think the thing that really struck me about your all story was that one of the things that you said, Kelly, at one point is, I think I met Eric at the thing in 2013, and y'all probably talk on a regular basis now. And what's interesting is the constellation of your different types of organizations and individuals representing different parts of the community who not just came together, but you brought your networks together. What's going on now? Because we spent 10 years of building the foundation of all this. It took someone sort of saying, and an administration saying this is important. We got all the boats at least pointed in the same direction. Cynthia, today, under the present mayor, Mayor Keller, where you serve as the Director of Economic Development, tell us what's going on now that built on the foundation of all of this.
Certainly. Now, it's important to note that no ecosystem is perfect, and it could never be perfect. And
that's another panel.
That's right. But our job today, collectively, is like a wise entrepreneur, to pivot in ways that improve upon the system and reach even more people locally. So the Keller administration, we've decided to also do a gap analysis, and we're working to fill in gaps around support for Albuquerque's diverse communities, entrepreneurs of color, and existing small business owners, as well as those who aspire to be small business owners, those entrepreneurs. Now, we firmly believe that connectivity between the entrepreneur and the small business support institutions is critical to the entire community's success. And so what we've done is we've implemented, as a result, all of this work has been informed by 10 years of this collective work. And so what we've implemented to date is the creation of a small business office. It's to serve as a central point of entry at City Hall to support Albuquerque entrepreneurs and businesses. Just this week, we announced the creation of the Albuquerque Minority Business Assistance Center, thanks to a grant from the Department of Commerce. And also my department has reconstructed what Mayor Berry created, the Small Business Regulatory Advisory Commission, which is a volunteer board to help inform and review policies and regulations that may or may not affect small businesses. And the list goes on. I could go on and on and on.
That's what I was going to say. The list goes on and on and on and on. And here's the thing. The entrepreneurship as a community sport was the theme of last year's ESHIP Summit. And when I look at you all and your photos, I'm so thrilled to know you all, because I met you individually through all this experience, and you are doing so much to affect and impact your community in inclusive ways. I want to let Faye wrap us up because we clearly did not have enough time to do it. But we did get through 10. We got through 10, Eric. I told you we could do it thanks to the support of our community to do that. I want to leave Faye with the last word on this because Faye, if people want to learn more about this story, this is not the end of our storytelling. It's just the beginning because in BIA, we met Charles Ross, and Forward Cities, the organization that Faye leads, is doing a whole day on Albuquerque and Baltimore. Faye, tell us about that and then just take us out. Just wrap this up and we'll send everyone, we'll send you all back into your own Zoom rooms to continue to engage with. But Faye, take us out. Tell us a little bit about the eBuilders Forum that you're working on in, I think, October.
Yeah, most definitely. Really excited for this event. The ecosystem world is getting smaller and smaller. Forward Cities is partnering with NBIA to do this event. Typically, it's in one city. We were going to do it in Baltimore and then COVID. So now we decided, why not open it up? Or we're going to do one day in Baltimore virtually, one day in New Mexico virtually. And we'll get to dig in and see all of the accelerators and incubators and entrepreneurs and all this amazing work that is happening in both these two places that you'd think would be very different, but we want to explore what's not just what's different, but also what similarities do they share. So excited about that coming up, and be on the lookout for that in late October.
Yep, and so the opportunity to learn more about that is MBIA and Forward Cities also have a virtual booth inside the Resource Expo, and you can check that out. Also, all of these, our friends here are all part of the event, so if you want to connect to them that way. But let's thank them in the chat and shout out for a quick, fast example. I feel like we read the back of the book, you know, when you read the back of the book, but you didn't, then you're like, oh wow, this book is actually 700,000 pages long. We got the back of the book, we got some highlights. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for helping people understand and see better how we can move our communities from disconnected to connected. And thank you for the impacts you're having, especially in this extremely challenging year as 2020. Thank you very much for joining us. And Faye, I want to shout you out. We're going to roll out to the close. Faye, you've been great to co-host. We'll see a little bit more of you tomorrow. You're going to have a session on talking about a program that Forward Cities is doing with the Kauffman Foundation, ESHIP Communities, in the small group session. And we'll also hear from New Mexico Community Capital as well. Thank you everyone for joining us in this conversation.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks, everyone.
So one thing that we learned is that through just talking about that is the role of government, in this case two different mayoral administrations. And the role of the public sector, of elected officials, is incredibly important, and it's a key component of creating a more inclusive and a more supportive environment for entrepreneurs. A lot of folks who are advocating for entrepreneurs know that there needs to be some public policy changes. But they don't totally know what they are. And public policy makers want to help entrepreneurs, but they don't know what they're supposed to do. This is such a great ecosystem example of disconnection. Two people that want the same thing, they have to find a way to come together and work together. What I want to highlight before we roll out of this session, there are two fantastic resources that are available to you right now if you want to look into what are the public policy recommendations on a local and a state, on a national level. And there are two public policy platforms that are available. America's New Business Plan, which is a bipartisan plan for policymakers that is focused on creating new jobs and leveling the playing field for startups and small businesses. This is one of the initiatives of the Kauffman Foundation, but it's backed by the entire coalition called the Start Us Up Coalition. Also, just about 2 weeks ago, the Institute for Justice released a policy framework or a policy guidebook to help think about how we better support entrepreneurs, particularly in the time of COVID. If you're interested in either of these, let's bring that slide up and leave it so people can see it. But if you're interested in either of these initiatives, you can find more in the Resource Expo, which is above me if you're inside the platform. You can also check out their websites as well. The folks from both of these initiatives will be speaking on the third day of the ESHIP Summit on September 29th. So come back for that if you're hanging out for the third day. And with that, I'm going to wrap this final plenary for day one of the 2020 ESHIP Summit. Whew! It's like drinking from a fire hose. The good news is we're going to have all of this recorded. We're going to have it here in the platform. This platform is actually going to stay open if you're inside the platform through the end of the year, so the end of 2020, so you could revisit these talks, the resources, the chats, all that stuff that's coming at you. But most importantly, I want to thank you for your time and your energy and your effort, for spending your afternoon with me and 50 of my closest friends. We're going to take a break here, and after that, a couple things you can do. We have the Resource Expo available up there. We have some specific live opportunities available over lunch tomorrow. You can browse that anytime. It's also going to be open through the end of the year. Lots of resources. We've heard just about Forward Cities. We heard about Living Cities. We heard about MBIA. We've heard about different programs like 1 Million Cups. You can find that all there. But if you're still interested in continuing to gauge and you want the opportunity to sit down and sort of process all that stuff that we just brought to you, we're going to have a campfire coming up in a very short bit. The afternoon campfire, again, an opportunity to sit together over shared experience and make connection, build bonds, and it's just like a real campfire, except for there's no campfire. So you're invited to join, meet some participants and other folks who are joining us from again across the country and around the world. Do navigate up to the full agenda, find the campfire 2. In this particular campfire, it's not going to be an entirely random group. It's going to be people in the sector that you most associate with, so you can pick which specific sector you affiliate with. Economic development, community development folks over here. Maybe we have folks in nonprofits over here. I mean, you can check it out to see the different things. All right, we're going to roll out of this session. Thank you again. Thanks for being with us here today. And don't forget to tune in after you get to the campfire. There's a social hour following that, and then tomorrow morning we kick off with the third plenary session, a deeper dive into entrepreneurial ecosystem at a building at 11 a.m. U.S. Central Time. Let's roll the video. Thank you very much.
Feeling like you're out there and you got to figure out every single thing on your own can become daunting.
What if we had all the answers we needed right here?
There are many times where I have reached a point where I thought this is a dead end.
There was something that was stopping me, maybe because I just never felt very comfortable or part of a team because I was always different.
What if we don't have to wait for the solutions we need? What if we're the solution, each one of us?
I like to show them that I'm really there to support them.
What if supporting our neighbors' small businesses was the answer to our big problems?
It's been a few decades of hard work. I think we now have real momentum.
What if we rebuilt the American dream one entrepreneur at a time, together?
When you're starting out, it's just so great to talk to somebody who's just been there. You know, there's a lot of stress that's involved in starting a business, and you're pretty much on your own.
You know, I didn't know what to expect, but to actually see that support come to fruition, I'm indebted to Kansas City forever.
I sent our entire church to support this guy right here.
They did, twice.
Twice.
Entrepreneurship creates jobs, spurs innovation, and boosts community wealth. But each month, only 3 out of every 1,000 people will become entrepreneurs.
We just made it a thing in our day. We would go jogging, I'd take my kid up. I want him to see a person of color who's running a health business.
The other 997 of us? We can all play a part.
What inspired me was the fact that I've always felt inspired in my life, and I wanted to share that with other people.
Their success is our success for our towns, neighborhoods, and cities.
Really, 10 years ago, the entrepreneurial ecosystem didn't look anything like it looks today.
Pretty exciting to be part of what's happening here. And
there's a lot of resources here that have been untapped for a really long time.
When we bring people together and empower them with great ideas, they're able to go forth and really make new businesses that change our community.
If I looked at myself from 7 years ago, I would not recognize myself.
We are the answers.
I'm really proud to say our entrepreneurial ecosystem has matured pretty rapidly over the past 5 years.
We are the solutions.
I think having a good, strong economy helps everybody, and that is helping people get jobs and keep jobs and start companies.
What good is it to have power if you're not willing to empower?
We knew that there was a need, and then we knew there was really something here and that we could really drive a change.
We are the mentors, teachers, investors, friends, employees, lawyers, customers, community leaders, policymakers, and family members who help build businesses and our shared future every day. Because entrepreneurship is a community sport. We can do this together.
I can be a role model.
I can open new doors.
I can take an entrepreneur to lunch.
I can connect entrepreneurs.
I can teach.
I can provide alternative financing.
I can rally behind your team.
I can.
I can.
I can.
What can you do